And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Reagan. It's great to be here, and it has been an honor to represent NASA living and working aboard our magnificent International Space Station for the past 6 months. It's also been a privilege and a pleasure to have flown not once but twice with our Russian partners aboard their historical Soyuz rocket and their spacecraft, as well as participating in all of their deep traditions through training, as well as launch and landing. And it's definitely a delight to be back home on Earth and to be sitting here to recount those experiences. So I just want to thank everybody for their interest and also in advance for the questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again. So we are going to go ahead and open up for questions using our phone bridge and through social media using the hashtag AskNASA. We do ask those of you who are dialed in to first state your name and your media affiliation before proceeding with your question. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with Robert Perlman with space.com.
Can you hear
me? We can hear you faintly.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. Hi, Tracy. Welcome home. You've now logged 372 days in space on 3 missions, but both of your cosmonaut colleagues that you came home with passed that in that one mission that they came home from, and of course, Oleg Kononenko passed his 1,000th day in space. If given the opportunity, would you want to spend that much time off the planet? And is there a point where you stop feeling the tug of Earth to come home, but instead start feeling as space being your home?
Wow, that's a heavy hitter starting off with that question. Having just come back, I would say that if it were just for the work alone, of course, I think the work that we're doing on board the International Space Station and with our partners, both internationally and academically and industrially, commercially, it's really meaningful work. And so I think for that reason alone, I would stay as long as it took. But of course, the tug of Earth and family and friends and the life that we lead here, not just personally, but also professionally, supporting the missions and helping to continue learning about this environment that we are exploring. It would be a hard call to go a straight 1,000 days like Oleg, but I think that definitely the work is meaningful enough to stay the duration.
All right, we're going to go ahead and open up questioning for Gina Sinceri with ABC News.
Tracy, I read the description of all the science experiments you did up there, and it was a very busy schedule. But looking at all those experiments, did any of them resonate with you? Boy, this would be handy when I go back to Earth to know about this, to help others.
I feel like there's a lot of ways I could answer that. Because the work, the science and the technology demonstrations that we do on board, sometimes the process of the science is really obvious to us crew members, especially when we are the human subjects of it. But sometimes it's not. And it's not until we talk with the principal investigators, the people who develop those payloads, that we start to understand what's going on behind the equipment that we set up, the cables that we connect, and things like that. But one study that was particularly fascinating to me in concept alone, not to mention my literal hands inside the facility helping to set up the experiments, was the biofabrication facility and the 3D printing of human tissue to create cardiac tissues as well as previously meniscus tissue. And I just think that from a standpoint of exploration, that's incredibly important as we think about staying where we're going as opposed to just visiting. But also here on Earth, what we can learn from this type of technology in that environment can lead to greater improvements here. And so that's just one example of the type of study that really fascinated me on board.
All right, thank you. On that note, we're going to move on to social media. We got a bulk of our questions on our NASA Johnson Instagram, and Kiara on Instagram asked, can you explain your work with cardiac tissues?
Oh, well, how about that? To say my work is a stretch, but my participation in the study of cardiac tissue was what I was just mentioning, the biofabrication facility, or BFF as we fondly called it on board. My work involved directly communicating with the payload developers and investigators inside of a glove box. That inside, when you just see a picture of the glove box, you don't get an appreciation for all of the sophisticated technology behind this plastic shield that my hands are inside. But there is this 3D printer that my job primarily was to exchange the cartridges, the ink cartridges, and to clean up after a run where the tissue was deposited, to then remove those units and put them in an incubator of sorts, and to just relay to the team on the ground what I was seeing in terms of the state of their equipment. That's in a nutshell.
Before we hop into our next question, I want to remind all of you who are on our phone bridge that you can line yourself up in our question queue by pressing *1. And if your question has already been answered, you can go ahead and press *2 to be removed. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump back into our phone bridge, and we'll pass it on to Robert Perlman again with Space.com.
Thanks. Tracy, you had attempted to go do a spacewalk twice. Can you talk about the problems that were encountered on the two attempts to go out, and actually the 31-minute what occurred during the 31-minute spacewalk that you actually logged without going outside?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. It's in some ways emotionally hard to talk about my spacewalks because the two attempts that we made didn't result in the clearing of the objectives that we had going in. But personally, personal feelings aside, those two attempts were a great moment for us as a team, both on orbit and with the interactions that we had with our team on the ground. Our first attempt, both spacewalks were to go perform the same content, which was primarily to bring in an antenna that was stowed outside, as well as do some microorganism swabbing, if you will, a COVID test for the International Space Station. But in the first case, my partner, Matt Dominic, had some suit issues that were just too important to take care of before going out into the vacuum. And on the second attempt, it was actually my suit that, well, it wasn't my suit, it was actually the station's umbilical that provides cooling and data and oxygen that had a leak. And it wasn't discovered until removing the umbilical once we were at vacuum inside the crew lock. And all the events that unfolded during that period of time were very character building for me, but also I felt during those moments were some of the finest in terms of communication, and that's what I think our human interactions are all about, is communication, and nothing was more important to me during that period of time than being able to communicate not just with the ground, but also my crewmate Mike Barrett, who was in the crew lock with me, as well as the rest of our crew outside, inside the space station, but outside the crew lock. I think we handled it, the situation, quite well, considering that I was really the only person that had eyes on what was happening, because we hadn't turned on our helmet cams yet, and there was very little external to the space station in terms of cameras that could see what was going on. But it was basically a fire hose of water and slush coming out of my umbilical, and it had covered my visor with ice. I couldn't see what was going on, and it took a few microseconds to figure out that what needed to be done. And I could go on and on to describe in detail all of the sequence of events, but just suffice it to say that it was great teamwork that brought us in in 31 minutes, and I'm going to hang on to those 31 minutes as some of the most character-building moments of my life in space.
Definitely. Thank you. Brian Bradley on X asks, what did the task of deploying the Cygnus spacecraft mean to you?
Oh, a great deal. Thank you. The Cygnus, if we're talking about NG-20, it was named after Patty Hilliard Robertson, who was a classmate of mine, and Sunny's as well, Sunny Williams on board. She and I were part of the 1998 class of astronauts, and Patty, who the Cygnus spacecraft was named after, was one of our classmates that we unfortunately lost during our ASCAN life. And it was so meaningful to not only be up there at the same time as the Patty Robertson, but also to be up there to share that experience with Sunny, because we were a very close group, and the three of us in particular, as well as Barbara Morgan, our fourth female in that class. So in addition to all of the great things that the Cygnus brings in terms of cargo and science and the capability that it has to also take away basically trash and other things that we don't need to have on the space station anymore. It is a workhorse. And to have interacted with that vehicle during a large portion of my stay on board was very meaningful and also very important. The Cygnus is quite a workhorse, as I said. So it was bittersweet to watch it fly away, but it was also a great privilege to have been the one in the cupola sending commands and also working with the team on the ground to ensure its safe departure. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, excellent question. John Mark on Instagram asked, does seeing Earth from space change your perspective on humanity?
Yeah, I don't know who could ever look out that window and see our planet and not think about the inhabitants of it. I think having been my third trip into space, it was no less significant to see it. It just pretty much engraved in my mind the memories that I had before of seeing the grandeur of our planet amidst the starkness of space, and just the miracle, I think, of us actually being there in low Earth orbit. What a position to be in, to be able to view our planet amidst the universe, and to also be able to observe through our great cupola windows the rest of our space station and be reminded in such beautiful ways with such a backdrop of the great partnership that we have developed throughout the history of our space programs, not to mention the space station, that have brought us that far. The space station is also a spectacle amidst the great creation of our Earth. So,
yeah, definitely. Speaking of that, I want to go ahead and ask my own personal question, just because you were on station during a time when a lot of world events were happening, like the total solar eclipse and the Olympics. What was seeing those events like, or hearing about them and keeping in tabs on them? What was that like from station?
Oh, it was really cool in so many ways, one of which was the enthusiasm of everyone and that we came in contact with, from those of us on board to those surrounding us in terms of support, as well as our family and friends. Everybody was so eager to know what we were experiencing and how we were experiencing these things, and just to know that the whole world was involved, especially the Olympics being as exciting as they are, and to have played a special role in terms of our shenanigans doing videos, as well as our psych support team piping up to us the highlights so that we could stay engaged in a meaningful way. The solar eclipse, not being able to see the eclipse itself, but the effect of the eclipse and that great shadow was, I think each one of us felt so blessed to be there, to witness that, and to see such a I guess you'd say, an overlap of celestial bodies and creating this tremendous shadow with such articulation on the surface of the Earth. And to go right over it, we had about 3 passes that we took at different angles over the great shadow, but the very meaningful one was right over the top of it. We could barely make out the features of the Earth that were under the shadow, but it was the contrast that was, I think, the most impressive. So between the darkness and then the beautiful multicolored planet that we live on. So.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see Earthbound, so I can only imagine. So moving on from that, Laurel on Instagram asks, how has spaceflight changed since your first shuttle mission?
Oh, a lot. So I've said this before. My first flight was an assembly flight of the International Space Station. We brought up a small piece, the S5, but a very important piece that connects S4 to S6. And so we also brought up a control moment gyro. And so and during that period of time, the space station was changing with every flight. Even schematics were changing, and so we, as crew members and students of the International Space Station, found ourselves constantly learning a new configuration. During my first long-duration stay, we were right at that transition where we were completing the space station assembly and beginning to utilize it. In fact, utilization was such a new term that we hardly knew how to describe it because we were still bringing on board the science, the sophisticated science that we have today. And so if you could imagine transitioning, say you had to, remodel your house, basically, you go from one purpose to another. That was my experience on my first long duration flight. And this flight, we are full throttle utilization. Science is the name of the game. Technology demonstrations are some of the most impressive works of imagination. To be there during this period of time is really rewarding personally and professionally to see, yes, indeed, we had a goal of utilizing the space station as a laboratory, and it is a multifunctional laboratory. It is a multicultural, international laboratory. It's just I think, a great work of art that represents our entire planet.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to go back to our phone bridge, and we're going to pass it on to Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. I'm curious how much the uncertainty of what was going to happen with Starliner affected life aboard the space station and your operations. I know that all of you are very flexible and all that, but just on a day-to-day basis, just not knowing what was going to happen, if Butch and Sunny were going to stay or if they were going to go, or the timeline for when the next crew would come up, the next NASA crew. Could you just talk about that? What was it like during that time?
Sure, Marcia, thanks. I think we all kind of had mixed feelings about it. We know that Sunny and Butch came up there with CFT to do a test flight, and we all had our minds wrapped around them doing a short duration flight. And so when things started to go in a different direction, and the uncertainty, as you mentioned, of when and how they were getting home, it, for me, was, and I know for Sunny too, because we're close friends, it was somewhat bittersweet because I wanted her to stay, of course, and she wanted to stay, but there was this work to do, and I think that the way we handle is the way we handle any unexpected event, which we as astronauts and as a space program are always prepared to handle the unexpected, and that is we go with the flow. And so I would say that, of course it's a roller coaster. You think you're going home, maybe you're not. Folks are finding new information. Our leaders had a really tough job to come to the conclusion that they did, but I think it was right, and I believe Sunny and Butch are at ease with their situation right now, being on board the space station until February. But despite the ups and the downs, the work up there is so meaningful, and we definitely needed the extra hand at the time that they were there. So everything worked out really in the favor of our space station and getting the work done. And both Butch and Sunny, I think, would tell you that the work that they've been doing since arriving, however long they stay, has utilized their skills, their experience, and they're willing to, with the support of their family, do what they need to do in order to support the space program, space station. So
Yeah.
that might have been a long-winded answer to your question, but I think the team handled it, the ups and the downs, with camaraderie and a focus on not themselves, but the work and the sacrifice that we all make to be there.
Yeah, definitely. You're obviously no stranger to the space station. So what is your favorite part every time that you get to return?
Oh, it's hard to pick one favorite part. Of course, the cupola. I mean, we all love the fact that we have such a great window to view our planet, and it kind of brings it all together of why are we there, because we get to reflect on this beautiful planet that we've obviously are all a part of, and it's about that and learning more about that through leaving the bonds of gravity and being able to observe it from this special platform at that special place. So the cupola and being able to view our Earth is certainly a great part of returning to the space station. But the work is really meaningful, and the interactions. It's really hard to encapsulate how meaningful that part is, because you spend so much time on the ground coordinating with your training team and your support team and those who develop the experiments that we do on board, as well as the training for taking care of the space station. But everybody that you get to interact with, and the fact that this is a global team, really it hits home a lot of ways is, when you're just setting up experiments, when you look at your timeline, you wake up and you've got this really ambitious day ahead of you, and you've got so many people you know that are on that planet helping you get through that day. I think that it is the teamwork that really, when I go back, is I think the most sustaining part to me about long duration.
Yeah, always comes back down to teamwork, for sure.
Absolutely.
And so Gary on Instagram asks, what was your favorite meal while on space station, and how does eating in zero gravity feel or look like?
Eating is an event. It's really hard to snack on the run. So when you are going to eat your meal, however, quick it is, like a bag of almonds, to assembling a combination of food in separate packets, you really got to put your thoughts into it, because eating in microgravity is fraught with peril sometimes, because food just goes. When you wear a nice shirt, you're always aware of the fact that it could be ruined. Barbecue sauce on the pants, that's a typical thing. So like I said, eating in space is so much different than eating here on Earth. You just simply can't do it on the go. You really have to be present with your food and your spoon for the sake of everybody, as well as the walls of the space station. My favorite meal, if I had to pick just one, it would be, I used to make with the tortilla, which is a great tool as well as a tasty meal, but a tortilla with beef brisket, braised red cabbage, if you can believe that, and I always enjoyed pudding up there for some reason, and I loved the mango salad. So those were kind of the fresher things that I enjoyed while I was up there.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to make one more pass through our phone bridge, and we'll send it back once more to Robert Perlman.
Thanks. Tracy, just before you came home, Roscosmos released a new schedule for their 2025 and 2026 Soyuz flights. And after Johnny Kim's upcoming flight, all the three-person crews were comprised of all Russian crew members. Whether or not that marks the end of seat swaps between the U.S. and Russia, as someone who's just come home on Soyuz, can you share your perspective on the crew exchanges and what value they bring to the ISS program?
I apologize, Robert. It was a little hard to hear, but I think I...
Would you mind repeating your question, please?
Can we turn up the...
Sure. Roscosmos is scheduled for the 2025 and 2026 Soyuz flights going forward. After Johnny Kim's upcoming flight, are all Russian crew members. Whether that marks an end to the seat swaps between U.S. and Russia, as someone who has just come home on Soyuz, can you share your perspective on the crew exchanges and what value they bring to the ISS program?
Sure. Like I said in my opening statement, it has been a real privilege to be a part of the traditions, as well as to ride aboard such an historical vehicle like the Soyuz, both the rocket and the spacecraft. And our Russian partners have been at this space traveling business as long as we have, and their community is precious to me, and the thought of not being able to participate in that from our side, the U.S. side, would be a loss, because the perspective that we have, being entrenched as we are as Soyuz flyers into their program, gives us insight that you wouldn't have otherwise. I believe in the robustness of their program and their vehicle. Their regard for their hardware, their people, like I said, is very precious to me. So in my personal opinion, I think that it strengthens our relationship, our partnership with them, and it translates to the work that we do on orbit as crewmates as well. You know, all that we go through in training, not just sitting in a simulator, but you know, through all the water and land survival and all the hard things that we do, from the day-to-day to seeing each other. I spent more time with my Soyuz crewmates than I did with my USOS crewmates on the ground. And so having that kind of interactions with our Russian partners really translates well into the relationships and working environment that we have on board the station. So from that perspective alone, I would hope that we would be able to continue flying and trading and doing this trade of Soyuz and USCV crew members from the other partner agencies.
All right. We have one more question from social media, and they ask what advice you would give to our younger generations who one day aspire to become astronauts.
Oh, wow. Well, I would love to be able to look into a crystal ball and see what our program's going to be like, specifically when our young folks are at that point of entering our program. But I think the bit of advice that I could give that I think rings true regardless of what age you are or era that you entered school is that you find the things that you really enjoy doing. And that may sound pretty simple, but it's actually not, because you've got all of these competing factors, especially when you take advice from folks and you're trying to weigh whether you should go into a certain field or do a certain thing, or think that it all relies on this particular niche that you do. But it really does involve your heart, I think. And when you enjoy what you're doing, it really brings out the best in you. And that is 100% what we need in the space program as we explore, as we go beyond, and we do things that we haven't done before, but are built on the experience that we've had in the environments that we have explored and have experienced in. So what I think is most important is that you enjoy what you're doing, and you put all that you can into it to improve yourself, but also to be a great team member. I mean, we wouldn't all be going into space if we were doing it all on our own. And so I think teamwork and enjoying what you're doing is probably the best overall advice I could give.
Yeah, what a great note to end on. Again, I think this concludes our post-landing news conference today. Again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us here today. We're so thrilled to have you back, and you're soon to be joined by NASA SpaceX Crew 8 members. So we're all looking forward to that. I just want to remind all of you who are watching on NASA Plus that NASA SpaceX Crew 8 members will be delivering their farewell remarks from the space station live on NASA Plus this Sunday at 9:55 a.m. Eastern. We'll see you then.